Good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to UT Dallas and to the Ackerman Center and to this year's Einspruch lecture. We are particularly pleased about this year's speaker who addressed us already last night after we jointly had watched the movie, and you will soon start to realize that there's much more to come. But it's now my great pleasure to first introduce our longtime friend, supporter, counselor for many, many years, the provost of the University of Texas in Dallas. And if you don't mind joining me in congratulating him to his birthday as well. I'm sure I'm in violation of a few fire codes here, but I feel very safe since it's for him. Happy birthday.
That's a brave man. I'm not sure he knows how brave he is, but he'll find out. It's a great privilege for me to be here today representing the University of Texas at Dallas and our Ackerman Center for Holocaust Studies and the Burton Einspruch Lecture Series, one of the high points of our annual Ackerman Center program. My UT Dallas birthday goes back to 1992, and very soon after I got to UT Dallas, I got to know Professor Geza Rohrig, and that's been one of the transformative acts of my my maturity, I would say, and I've learned so much from Geza and our Holocaust program, and then over many years at the Einspruch lectures. So it's a great pleasure to be here yet again. So welcome all of you, and now let me ask our chairman of our advisory board, Mr. Saul, to come and continue with the program. Thank you.
Thank you. I too would like to welcome everybody to this wonderful auditorium and this wonderful Einspruch lecture. It's been 30 years since the Ackerman Center for Holocaust Studies was founded at UT Dallas, and it was founded by a most wonderful woman who most of you already know, Professor Geza Rohrig. And like Hobson's experience, meeting Geza, which I did in 1989, literally changed my life. And she has changed the lives of hundreds, even thousands of students in the last 30 years that she's been here. One of the highlights of the Ackerman Center this past year, in last April, was a dinner we had in her honor, an evening with Geza, at which time about 225 people came and raised close to $400,000 for a scholarship fund named after her late husband, its fund, and Geza Rohrig. It's a research scholarship fund. We expect to have a large amount of matching funds come from Austin. That money will be distributed to students to help graduate students attend conferences all around the world and help them defray some of the costs of their studies. They say that nice things or good things come in little packages. Geza Rohrig is a small package, but a great woman, a giant of a teacher at this university. She has one fault: she can't say no to anything. She says yes to everybody, especially her students. She's available to all the organizations in Dallas who ask her to speak, and she's there for them. She's there for her students 24 hours a day, and for the board and everyone associated with the University of Texas and the Holocaust Studies program. So it's my privilege now to introduce Professor Geza Rohrig, who will introduce our guest speaker.
The only problem is that after such introduction, one is slightly silent, and cannot talk very well, so especially such undeserved introduction. I have done that what I have been the most interested in, and I have been teaching the Holocaust, and I had an incredible helper who is Dr. Wildenthal, whom we can be grateful for everything that happens. And then there is Sally Belowski, who is incredibly supporting and helping us. And then there are the wonderful students and my wonderful colleagues. So basically, if anybody asks me how I am, I can really say that I have, as a working place, I have a heaven. And that is really true. And this is without any exaggeration too. So thank you for all of you who are here and has helped the Holocaust Studies program to grow into what it is today. So I would like to introduce our today's speaker, Geza Rohrig, who is a wonderful poet, basically in Hungarian, so you don't know him very well, but maybe one day he will be translated and then you will know him better. He is well known in Hungary and very much loved and has some beautiful Holocaust poetry, has written some beautiful Holocaust poetry. He also is teaching all kinds of classes, undergraduates, elementary school children, children in high school, and so on and so on. I think even kindergarten. And he is a student, he had been a student at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. We are looking very much forward to his talk, and we are incredibly happy that he is here, and we are very proud of him because he is such a very good and very nice man and such a wonderful speaker as we have experienced it yesterday. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you so much, Zsuzsa, for your kind words. I assume most of you saw the movie. Good. I tried to talk that it should or would be nice if it would make sense, even if you didn't, but it helps if you did. I think what I have to talk about is playing Saul instead of Saul. So when I first received the script on email as an attachment, I knew what is it going to be about, and I had a tremendous reservation, let's say, against it, and I thought it's gonna be probably it'll take me like 5 pages or 5 minutes, and then I'll simply just will turn it down. I was, and I am still extremely frustrated with the so-called Holocaust movies. And then I started reading it, and I was way in page 10, page 20, and I realized that the director, László Nemes, who wrote the script as well, basically attempted to avoid the same exact mistakes and dangers and pitfalls that I was very worried about. So the script was very convincing. And what are the dangers I'm talking about is when we first met, I read the script before meeting him. When we first met, we sit down with the cameraman and we said, what do we want to achieve and what we don't want to have? And we wrote it down on a piece of papers, and then we showed the papers to each other. So one thing right away came up. All three of us wrote on the top of the list, we don't want anybody to cry. And I really hope you didn't cry watching this movie, because that wasn't our intention. Actually, we did our best to avoid that. And if you cried, we consider it as our failure. We wanted to make a movie that does not primarily target your emotions, because we think that simply doesn't do justice. You know, you cry when you lose your parent or something terrible happens in life. I don't think crying was the reaction we were looking for. We were looking for something more visceral, more physiological, if you may, something that goes a bit deeper than your eyes, maybe to your stomach, maybe to your bones. We wanted to make a very immersive movie, you know, not your regular formulaic Holocaust movie that we all have seen plenty. And when I mean plenty, I mean, you know, hundreds of them. I would tell you a joke, and that kind of maybe sheds light what am I after. There was a drunk man, and the drunk man was on his four at night around the lamppost. And the police saw the man, and he said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm looking for my keys." And the police guy asks, "Well, where did you lose your keys?" And he says, "Well, about 200 feet that way." And the police says, "So what are you looking for here?" He says, "Well, here is the light." And I think that basically what directors forget, especially in Hollywood, that if you want to make a movie about Auschwitz, you have to go into the dark. You're not going to find a key where the light is. You're not going to be able to pull it out if you use the regular book of tricks or routines that how you make movies otherwise. So if you take a look at ours, we have no monologue, we have no music, we have no total. In other words, each picture is really very close to you. And most importantly, generally speaking, a full-length movie has somewhere between 200 or 300 cuts. Our movie has 70 cuts. That means that the scenes are long, sometimes 1 minute, sometimes 3 minutes, one scene. We don't cut it. He said something, his face. He said something, she said face, 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 face. We didn't want interruption. We wanted to be immersive. We wanted to take you there, the here and now of Auschwitz. We wanted you not to know more than the people could have known then and there. We didn't want you to look back, retro, post-war, right, from 2016 or 15, with all your knowledge. There was a lack of predictability at the time. These people, what they knew was extremely limited. They arrived, and the next day they found themselves in very, very weird and tough situation, but they didn't know historically what you know now. In cases, they didn't even know what country they were. So that's true in general, but how much more so in the case of the Sonderkommando, which I'm sure by now you're familiar with. This is the squad, this special squad that was recruited pretty much right up on arrival. And these people, of course, were not given any sort of fair job description. No one explained to them, what are you going to be selected for? They were rather trapped into this function. They were asked questions like, do you want to sleep in a heated area? Well, who wouldn't want to sleep in a heated area? Do you want to have a bit better food ratio than the others? Well, who wouldn't want to have a better food ratio? So people raised their hands. The last living member of the Sonderkommando, there's only one alive in Los Angeles, the Greek guy, 94 years old. So imagine him coming from Greece, right? He's coming in the middle of winter. The Polish winter is not merciful, especially not if you're from Athens. If you're a Greek guy, it's way below minus 20 Celsius. Extremely cold. 1944 is a very cold winter. And they are asking you want to have hot shower? So he raised his hand, my friend, raised his hand. And then they walked into a building, and the next thing he knew is that there are these piled up dead bodies, and he's responsible to burn them 12 hours a day. And what choice did he have over the matter? Well, he could have committed suicide. Even that wasn't so easy, but there was a Czech-Slovakian, actually, Slovakian Jew by the name of Philip Muller. You can read his book, and he tells in his book that he did try to commit suicide. He tried to sneak into the gas chamber as a Sonderkommando member. So there he was, fully dressed up among the naked, hoping to go, because it was ethically unimaginable for him to assist in the extermination of his brothers and sisters. But then the women pushed her out. She was where the women were. She pushed him out, saying, look, we have to die. We have no choice. But you don't. Go and tell the world. Tell the world about our fate. And they pushed him back. He couldn't. The day before, he walked up to a Nazi asking for a poison. And the SS person said, are you kidding? Go back to work. This is now, you're not going to be so lucky just to be able to. No. And this is the most demonic and, to me, the most unforgivable aspect of the Holocaust is this division of labor that the Nazis applied. In other words, they did not even let these people to have the solace, the comfort of being innocent. They dragged them down onto the rock bottom level of their own morality. They made them partners in crime, in their crime. And that is why these Sonderkommando members, the 100, just about 100 who was liberated, because regularly they were liquidated after like 4 or 5 months. So the last generation at 45 January that was still in the camp after the Germans left already, the Soviets came in and they had this extremely strong prejudice against the Sonderkommando. So they said, raise your hand if you're a Sonderkommando member. So some naive Sonderkommando raised their hand, and the Soviets, the liberators, shot them right on the spot. They said, you are worse than the Nazis because you killed your own, right? So the Soviets thought, the Zionists thought, the prisoners in the barracks thought that these people are collaborators. They were the very bottom of the hierarchy in the lager, in the camp. They were treated and viewed worse than the capos. And for that reason, these people were not sharing their own stories, not even with their own families. And I personally know in Westchester, I have a friend who knew in his entire life, so did his brother, that their father was in Auschwitz, and that's all they knew. And when he died, they learned from the will in front of their attorney that his father wants to be cremated and he wants his ashes to be brought back to Auschwitz and placed in the crematoria, which is in itself, of course, extremely disturbing. But then it turned out, also was part of the letter, the will, is that he was a Sonderkommando member. So imagine the guilt, imagine the trauma this person hasn't shared this with in his entire life with his own sons and wife. In what capacity was he at the camp? He kept silent, he was eating him in his whole life, and at the very end, basically it became clear that he himself feels that he belongs to the brigade more than to his own family. His final rest, he wants to be in a crematory. He never was able to come to terms and make peace with the fact that he survived. And my friend David and Noah were shocked. And they asked the rabbi and they asked me and they were speechless. What should they do? Should they cremate him? A person who was cremating thousands of people a day. Should we follow his last wish? These are extremely complex and hard questions. It's just one example of one Sonderkommando member that these experiences do never leave them. My friend in Los Angeles grew up in Thessaloniki, grew up in Italian Jewish parents, but lived in Greece, was born in Greece. And he sings operas, and he's a very, good outlook in life. But he tells me that it's all ends as soon as he closes his eyes. And he doesn't need to be anywhere in bed or at night. He closes his eyes and there he is all over again. An uneducated man. This is not a person who, gives talks or reads Holocaust studies books. He doesn't need to. So the question for me as an actor was, how can you get to this state of mind, what these people must have been, day by day, night by night, when there is simply nothing in my own life that would qualify me. I have nothing, I haven't experienced anything at all that would enable me to even get close to what it could have been like. So what can you do? Because when it comes to making movies on the Holocaust, there are two parallel truths right away you have to face. One is that it's an impossible task. You're gonna fail, and yet you have to try. But I wouldn't try the old way. So if the script would have been, just like all the others, and I'm gonna get into that in a minute, because I am sure that some of you, saw Schindler's List, and it was an important thing for you in the mid-90s. Was it 90s, 84? Mid-90s, correct? That was the year when the Holocaust Museum opened in Washington. It was Bill Clinton, correct? So That's not the worst movie, Schindler's List, but I have huge problems with it. And it's not because after Son of Saul, I had huge problems with it even before. So in some circles, they call Son of Saul the anti-Schindler List. And Spielberg knows that. And he's a nice guy. He loves our movies. And I think his movie is important. It was important. But there is a world of difference between his movies and his movie and ours. I speak Polish, and I lived in Poland at the time when he was shooting Schindler's List. And so I thought, and I told my friends, let's go to the shooting of Schindler's List. Let's meet Steven Spielberg. Wouldn't that be interesting? I was 21 years old. So we tried to make that happen, and it turned out that even though he's very nice and approachable and all that, it's not gonna work because guess what? He's shooting Schindler's List during the day, but he's editing Jurassic Park at night. Because if you recall, Jurassic Park was shown and got into the movie theaters in September '95. So he had a deadline. So he was shooting Schindler's List. He's a workaholic. You know, got a nice dinner in a hotel, and then in Poland, he was editing the dinosaurs. I don't think I have to comment on that too much. Having said that, what is my problem a little bit more specifically with Schindler's List and why is it important? Because we very consciously didn't want to do anything like that. Well, one of my main problems is that the movie is black and white, and then at the end, it's colored again. Starts colored, ends colored, middle black and white. What does it tell you? It tells that the world, according to Steven Spielberg, the Holocaust is an episode. It was fine before, it was fine after, it wasn't fine during the time. That's the way he looks at it. It was shitty, it was bad, it was terrible, it's over. We don't think that. It's very comforting, it's very reassuring, but I don't think the world justifies that way of thinking. I don't think it was an episode. I don't think it's over. I don't think history turned the page over Auschwitz. I look around, I see Darfur, I see Rwanda, look around, can we say that? Is the human psyche we develop? Is the generation since then do not face permanent possibility of genocide? So that's one problem. Second problem, even though the people are dying right and left in Schindler's List, anybody who has a name, it's a long movie, 3 hours. Anybody who has a name, who you identify emotionally with, everybody survives. 100%. It is true. Yes. If you go and say, whoever has a name survives. Check it out. I don't make this up. I think that's undefendable. You have to contrast that with the facts, and that's not what happened. In any case, so when we sat down and we said, listen, is there a way, a sort of a language or an angle that we can make a movie that is not gonna be like one of those, this sentimental sort of thing? And then the director, to whom the credit goes, because He is the one who spent 5 years with this movie. I was there for 28 days. He came up with the concept of, if you don't show enough, if you sugarcoat it like Spielberg, then you don't do that. If you show it, you're going to end up with a horror movie. And horror movie is not going to work either, because by the 5th minute, you get immunized, and you see what you see, and it's like, okay, fine. Am I going to see this for 100 minutes? So he came up with this great idea that we're going to show very little, but we're going to show everything. And the everything will be in the background, and the little be in the foreground. So you're going to see my face all the time. And in a foggy way, in the background, everything happens, but you can't fully really see it. We're going to leave it up to your imagination. You have to bring it home yourself. You see it, but you don't see it. You perceive it, you don't see it. So all what you lost with your eyes, you're going to get it back with your ears. And that's why the soundtrack are super important. It was post-production, 5 months, layer by layer. The noises, the screamings, the German, the cacophonic linguistic cosmos. Polish, Yiddish, Hungarian, Slovakian, Greek, Italian, French. I think there was like 24 countries, people from 24 countries in Auschwitz. So that was 5 months, 8 hours a day to make that sound. Sometimes it felt too rich, had to shave it back a little to build up the sound. Very rarely you see a movie where the sound is as important as in Son of Saul. There are minutes and minutes when you can completely close your eyes and you're not going to lose track. You're going to still be there just by listening to the soundtrack. So this dynamic vision and the sound was also his idea. The dialogues, which are extremely broken. His Yiddish is extremely broken. I'm not sure if who recognized or not. He's not talking fluent Yiddish. Everybody who knows Yiddish knows Kaddish. He's talking in a faulty Yiddish, because Yiddish was the lingua franca. That was the common language in the camp. And even my friend who is Greek, what do Greek know Yiddish? Nothing, gurnished. Yet, he had to pick up Yiddish because that was the language, that most people use there. But it's a wrong Yiddish. So let's go back again. When I say Schindler's List, I mean another 500 movies behind that are much worse than Schindler's List. So they speak English in Auschwitz. What do you say about that? So there are some 20-some languages. There's one language, for God's sake, that wasn't in Auschwitz. It wasn't liberated by the Americans, and there was not one single person who grew up in English in Auschwitz. Yet, these people, they say, "How are you?" And they talk English right there. You can say, "I'm a snob, I'm a European," and all that's fine, I take it. But you lost me right there. Just lost me. So we thought that what we have to do, we have to pour clear water into the cup. The Holocaust has been exploited by Hollywood. People made these movies. Again, this time I'm not talking about Schindler's List, because Schindler's List is a honest attempt, and it has a fantastic pedagogical or educational value. North America and other parts of the world really met with this narrative. I guess lots of people, first-time non-Jews, Schindler's List, people who don't read. I acknowledge that. And I don't want to be unfair. But there are the worse than Schindler's List Holocaust movies, which are running a love story, but they are untalented people. So they think, the story is so-so. Why don't we sprinkle a couple swastikas in this? Why don't we put a little wire? Why don't we do this? It's a silly love story. It's such a cookie cutter. It's jellyfish. It's nothing. But if we put a little Holocaust in it, come on. So they use the dramatic value in a silly, unnecessary way, and it's not even targets or interrogates what happened in Auschwitz. Auschwitz is nothing else, just a background to the absolutely B-rated, C-rated, mediocre love story. And there are hundreds of movies like that. And no one had the guts or the power. It's a free world, of course, and it should be free. The head of the studios to say, like, guys, can you stop it? So we started to shoot, and the shooting was the best part of it. Because up until the shooting, I was stressed out. I didn't know what to imagine. I thought we get ourselves into too big a task. That's why we didn't get money from Israel. That's why we didn't get money from France. We didn't get money from Germany. No one gave us money. We asked for 40 days. People don't move a finger for the money we started this movie with. First-time director, never finished film school. First-time actor, never finished acting school. It's a labor of love. But we were all very connected to the material for whatever personal reasons, family reasons. And we just believed in this. We didn't believe at all or hoped or expected to go to the Oscars and all that. That wasn't the plan. But we wanted to make a movie that's fair, that achieves what we set in front of our eyes to achieve. And after the first day, I was relieved because I had a costume, I had makeup, I had lines. I had something to work with. Before running up to the shooting, nightmares and worries and all that. So it was a redemption, the shooting itself. And then we stopped shooting, and then came the so-called the afterlife of Son of Saul, the promotion of Son of Saul. Right away, we got the award in Cannes, and Sony Pictures Classic bought the movie. And then came the Golden Globe and, the whole thing. And we heard crazy things in a very short time. The Pope saw the movie. The Pope wants to meet us. The President of the European Union, who's a German guy by the name of Martin Schulz, good guy, he saw the movie. He wants to talk with us. So we did all that. And it was about a year and a half kind of running around in the world, dozens of countries, 20-some countries. And, almost every weekend there was a premiere. This Sunday it was Italy, next Thursday it was Spain, Portugal, and we just kind of went country by country. So I have this experience. This is also part of playing Saul of Son of Saul, the afterlife. And I don't know what to tell you about that. I did it because it is a cause. That's why I'm here. I think it's important. And to some degree, I'm glad that there are the new Cannes and the new Oscar, and sort of because you can't really do this for very long, simply because the subject matter of our movie and the general ambiance of a cocktail party or these festivals and this very, the setting of these meetings and the fast, it's somewhat, the contrast is not so easy to my stomach. The small talk, the celebrity culture, the fashion, the whole thing. So I'm glad it's quieting down. And if I have to sum it up, I think that this is a story that has to be told, I guess, once in every 10 or 20 years. And if our movie did it now, I wouldn't be surprised. Actually, I expect 20 years from now, people say, oh, that Son of Saul didn't get it right. That was just one of those like Schindler's List. Fine. You have to tell it in 1995. It worked then. Maybe if I would have been 40 or whatever at 1995, I would have also, I cried on Schindler's, make no mistake. But I had a certain, something was missing. And I had a certain level of frustration with it, and that became sort of almost an anger during the years. But that is how it is in the history of art. There's very few things. There's no original things. What you have to do is you have to do it to say it now. What in today's world. And it is important to say it because, of course, the big questions I hope people walk away watching our movie is, how did we get here? Who's responsible? Because on the one hand, all the top Nazis were not Christians, right? We know that. But this could have not happened without the church either. So where does responsibility belong to? And as I told you, I think it's simply silly and stupid somehow to say that we have learned from it what we had to learn from it. Well, we might, but I don't think the world did. Is there anything else we can do besides making movies and teaching it? And I don't know. So let me see. Let me think what else is part of what I wanted to tell you today. Meanwhile, if you do have a question, raise your hand, and that might orient me to cover some parts that I did not cover yet. Yes. So this is a very weird part. Did everybody hear the question? Oh, sorry.
Could you tell us something about your personal process in inhabiting this role from moment to moment?
So thank you. What I recognized early on, that this is a non-role. The dream for every actor is to be a peacock and show all your feathers and all your colors and all that. This is a one-note role. Basically, you could say, if you want to be more sophisticated, that there are 3 Sauls in the movie. One is up until meeting with the boy, which is a dead person. And then the resurrected Saul, who gets into this obsession to bury the boy. And there is Saul number 3 at the end of the movie, who is like a soap bubble flying in the air, and you know that it's any second it's just gonna go. He didn't have to be shot in order to be dead again. The movie starts, he's dead. And the movie ends, he's dead, but he's a happy dead person. He's a smiling dead person. I watched dead people it's part of Jewish religion to wash for Jewish man the man who died. Women wash women, right? I can tell you, I don't know, I don't want to get into it why or not, but most people when they die, they have a very peaceful face. Not everybody. So he was already in that state. He was a completely fulfilled man. He had no purpose to be on this earth anymore. So that was Saul number 3. Saul number 2 was 100 minute in the movie. That was the Saul, so to speak. So all I had to do is to keep on the intensity. Since it's my face and you have the most muscles, anatomically speaking, you have, if you add up all your muscles in your body below your head, you're going to have less muscles than in this triangle. These muscles around the eye, the nose, and the mouth are tiny. But that's why the human face is the human face, because these little muscles make the differences of everything. When I look at you, if you're lying, if you're not lying, if you're honest, if you're curious, whatever, everything is, the eye is always the same. I mean, you can say the pupil goes, but it's really around. So how can, if the camera is like this close to me, how people will not be bored with my face for an hour and a half? That was the question as an actor. And the secret, so to speak, was, again, I had to do thousands of pages of reading, not what these people felt and thought after the war. I couldn't care less about that. I wanted to know nothing more what these people knew at the time when they were there, and that was little. And I wanted to, most important, I wanted to know in the very painstakingly detailed way of what they were technically doing, what they spent their day with. If they're pulling the gold teeth, how did they do it? Did they use a mirror? Did they use a flashlight? How many of them did it? If they cut the hair, when did they do it? Where did they do it? So when we were improvising, running up to the role, the director asked me once, tell me one day of yours, from getting up in the bed to going to bed. And I spoke for hours. And there is no other way to do it. If you can't tell this in 10 minutes, you're not going to be able to play the role. My head was completely into being in October 6, 1944 in Auschwitz-Birkenau and focusing on this, couple hundred of square meters where they were quarantined in, with absolutely not allowed to have any communication with the rest of the camp. And I just needed to know exactly what they were doing. So I was physically, manually trying to schlepping bodies and figure it out, how to do it without losing too much energy, how to eat, what to eat, why. That was why my preparation was entirely just this being there. That was what I was mainly interested in. And no big questions, nothing. I don't think they were, I think their life, especially morally speaking, was on a pilot flame. This was a minimum bare of existence, very little. And the question for me was, for Saul, is there anything more than survival? And from his behavior, we know that his answer was yes, there is. The rest of the gang, who was trying to rebel and get the hell out of the place, it's a legitimate but somewhat animalistic answer. Because even the cat or the dog is jumping out from the window from a burning house on the 3rd or 5th floor. They wanted to save their skin. Fine. They did something for themselves. Fine. It's instinctual. It's okay. But Saul did something for someone else. And to me, that's a level higher. He resisted in his own way. Is there another question, I see?
Thank you. We have microphones on either end, so if you just raise your arms, I think here's the next question.
I saw the movie last night for the first time, and there was one part in it that I didn't understand. When he went to the women's part of the camp and this character Ellie to get some kind of package or something.
That's true. Actually, 4 women were executed for, what's the word I'm looking for? Getting the dynamite, the material to blow up the crematoria. So they were planning to rebel. And interestingly, the survival rate was much higher among women in the Holocaust than among men. Much more women survived. Somehow the Nazis did not think that women would participate in such effort, rebellion somehow. So it is totally historically based, as is the entire movie. We had historians, we had experts. The last thing we wanted to do is something like, what's the name of that movie, Life is Beautiful? Which is so nice. Except, yeah, you remember that scene? The first half it's a lovely Italian comedy. But do you remember that scene in the second half when he gets the microphone and he sends a message, a little love message to his... So that's, again, it's falsifying history. It could have never, ever happened. So learning from these movies that make up scenes like that and place it in the concentration camp, we wanted to make sure that each license plate uniform, everything is based on accuracy and history, everything. And so far, so good. There's one thing, and I can tell you privately after, I don't want to say it here in the mic, there's one thing we got wrong. Not a big thing, but one thing we got wrong. Besides that, and trust me, especially in Germany, but other places, people put this movie under the microscope to come up with something that could not be that way or wasn't that way or something. So it was very important for us, the women, that this movie could have been a Robinson Crusoe, right? There's a very few pieces of art that have no women in it. We didn't put there a woman because we wanted to have a young, sexy woman in it. There were women in the story. That's why they were there. Ella. Who was Ella for Saul and all that? There's a room for, how they call it, license for, that I can't answer for you, definitively. But it is a historical fact that the women were part of this rebellion, this revolt, and they were having this dynamite that was given to Saul. So that's the part that you were asking about.
Two questions. First, where was it shot actually? Was it shot on a set, or was it shot in an historical place? And second, I noticed last night in the movie that it seemed very easy almost to bribe the guards.
Yeah, it was easy because the guards were drunk most of the time. You see, this is another question that comes up. People ask, totally nice people, they ask, can't we understand the Germans too? I mean, for God's sake, he's a 20-some years old young man. He's ordered to do that. He has family. Blah, blah, blah. And the answer is no. Again, just history, ask anybody. If you were a German positioned in Auschwitz to be a guard, and you said, for religious purposes, I can't do this. I'm not able to gas children. I'm sorry. It's against whatever I believe in. And you walked into the office and you said, I can't do this. You absolutely had no punishment whatsoever. They said, fine. And people did that. There are plenty of documented German people who said, I can't do this. I'm sorry. First they said, I need some sleeping pills, whatever. I have a hard time. If it's not for you, it's not for you. They found some other things to do, not in a concentration camp. So that's just on the side, I wanted to clarify that nobody had an excuse to be like, they had to do it. No, they didn't have to do it. Yes, they might have said, I don't want to die, I don't want to fight in the front, I'd rather be here. Yeah, well, that's their choice. So to answer your question, the movie was shot in the outskirts of Budapest. It was, I believe, a pre-war storage house for the army. It had the same sort of bricks that we were looking for in Auschwitz, that red bricks. And your second question was?
That the guards were easily bribed.
Yeah, they were. They wanted to make money. And these guards, they were drunk. Look, no one is jealous for what they were doing. Imagine what they saw the same thing as the Sonderkommando, day by day by day. One way to cope with it was to drink. And yes, especially when they knew that the Russians are nearby, right? They knew that this might not end well. And they needed jewelry. They knew they're not going to be able to stay in Germany. They need to go somewhere. They needed some capital. They needed some dough. So if someone walked up to him and he said, the war doesn't look all that good to you. Why don't you take this earring and give me for some, then they were more than happy to take it.
The essential act of this deeply moving film, Saul's sacred obligation to bury a relative against not only the restrictions of the Nazis, but also of his own community within Auschwitz, invites, for me, inevitably comparison with Sophocles' great drama, Antigone. Was this, do you know, a conscious transformation of the film, or just something that inevitably develops in some people's mind?
The later. I understand the parallel, but if you never heard about Sophocles in your entire lifetime, I think the movie works just as well. So we didn't rely or build on the Antigone. The question. Here in the front, there's a lady. Oh, and a gentleman, so.
It's obvious that you mentioned during your talk about your life leading up to the movie that one of the things was that you'd gone to the seminary in New York. Then you make this movie, and I assume that from the time when you finished the movie that you learned a lot during the filming of the movie. My question to you is based on a statement you made about the importance of having a movie like this every 20 years or so. Schindler's List came out, 20 years later, this movie comes out. 20 years from now, if they were to make a remake of The Son of Saul, and they asked you to direct the movie, based on what you have learned, what would you do differently if you were the director 20 years from now?
Well, I won't take I would turn it down immediately. Since Son of Saul, I gave back 8 roles in Holocaust movies. I'm not interested. This is I think we did it, and now I would never in my entire life got near to any movie role directing or acting that has anything to do with the Holocaust. I'm done. Thank you. It's your turn. So, but my leading up to this movie, it wasn't anything to do with the seminary. It had to do with my own personal life, my parents and grandparents. It's absolutely nothing that the seminary contributed to it. But before the next question, I thought there's something else that might be interesting to share with you. I'm not sure if you know, if I use the right term, what is a decoy doc? A decoy doc. I think that's the way to translate it into English. Anybody know hunters here? Decoy doc? Anybody? You know what is a decoy doc? Okay, so I think the Sonderkommando members were decoy docs. A decoy doc is a plastic dock that you can go online and buy for $5, and you put it in a bay, and the real docks, they see that, oh, it's a safe place, look, docks. And they're gonna go there with their chicks, and it's like, hello, docks, it's kind of cool here, and then they're being shot. That's what the Sonderkommandos were. People get out of the train, and they were frightened. They hadn't seen the light. They were like 80 of them in one, what do they call it, a cattle, right, cattle car. You know, they were smelly and hungry and frightened, and they come out, and all of a sudden they see these Jews. They speak Yiddish. They said, okay, whew, all right, Jews are here, like ducks. You know, it's okay, it will be all right, there are Jews here. And they didn't know that 70% of them will be gassed and burned in the next 2 hours. And that's what happened. And these people, the Sonderkommando members, they were constantly asked questions. Are we really going to take a shower? Are we? Tell me what's happening here, because I have some kids. I need to know what's going on. And this friend of mine told it, I said, what was the hardest? And he said, the hardest for me was that there were women, mothers, with kids. They were all, of course, selected right away for the gas. And, you know, they described, as you saw it in the first 5 minutes in the movie, that fast, there will be soup, there will be tea, remember your number, make sure you tie your shoes together, it's going to be all right, you're just going to be, you know, a quick defertility, whatever is the word, the lice and whatever it's going to be. But there were some mothers, a minority of the mothers, in their kishkas, in their guts, they just felt that this might, and they especially during winter when they had long coats and they put it on they told the kids, you stay here, mommy will be back, you stay here. And the kid was like, okay. And they were walking to the gas chamber, and these women keep looking back for the little legs, the children under the coats. Who, of course, some of them were just, mommy, and they started to run, but some of them were old enough, and they might peed, but they were waiting because they promised to mommy to wait. So the Sonderkommando had to take the coats off the hook. And they saw the little legs there. There were children hiding behind. That was the hardest thing for me, my friend says in Los Angeles, 94. To take the coat and the kid is right there standing like this. That's what we are talking about, decoy DAX. Yes?
When I was a teenager, my mother was a slave at Auschwitz, and she worked in the ammunition factory. And when I had a great aunt in the United States that sponsored our family too, and when she died, we found a box of pictures. And one picture in particular, my mother didn't talk about experiences during the war, but one picture was of a couple from the 1920s, and they were a beautiful couple. You know, the man had slick back hair with the part in the middle, and she said he worked at the crematorium. And when I worked at the ammunition factory, a distant cousin of theirs snuck ammunition to them, and he blew himself up in the crematorium, and they hung the women that were, sent the ammunition. For weeks, they had them hanging, she said, as a warning. And this all kind of brought that back. My mother, it just, this whole story. And
Yeah.
I think it was before 1944, because she was taken out of Auschwitz in
Yeah.
44 and brought to Ravensbrück.
Right.
So, but I'm not,
Well,
I wish I would have asked more questions. That was a mistake.
Yeah.
But
Well, thanks for sharing that. Every single armed rebellion during the Holocaust, every single armed rebellion within the camps was done by the Sonderkommando members. Understandably, no prisoners ever dared to. Why? Because the prisoners outside in the barrack, they always had the slight hope to make it. These people had absolutely no hope. They were the crown witnesses, and they knew that they're going to massacre. Nobody wants to have witnesses. So they knew their days are numbered. So what you were describing happened in a few camps, and these women were hanged, and they had this sign, kosher meat for sale, and they were up there for days. And they were hanged because they were women. That was the Nazi army. Even the Nazi army had this etiquette that they were shooting the men, but they were hanging the women. So the men who were involved, they got shot. And the sad thing is that hopefully you don't know, but now I'm going to tell you, what is the only part of the human body that it's edible right away? The brain. It's protein, it's good. So when they shot this man, there were plenty of people jumping and eating the brain right out.
Okay. I have a very simple observation about the film and why I was so moved by it. The Sonderkommandos had to be in the most dehumanizing situation of what was already deeply dehumanizing. And it was amazing to me that in the middle of all this, Saul decides that he has to bury who he believes to be his son. And not only does he have to bury him, first of all, he asked about how to say the Kaddish, and then he decides, he gets this obsession to find a rabbi to do it. And that's the most human kind of, his humanity seems to return to him for that particular deed. And then the end of the movie I think is one of the best endings I've ever seen in a movie, because it makes so much, it's so real. We get this sense of these guys, these inmates are fleeing for liberty, that they've made it, and at the end, everybody dies. It's not like the usual movie, which ends up with beautiful music where everybody is suddenly liberated or falls in love or something like that. The movie is brutal, and it's so compelling. It's powerful.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, when did you hear this movie was going to be made, and what was your desire to play the main part in the movie to try out for?
Can you raise your hand? I can't see you.
Right here.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go on.
The question is, where were you when you heard that this movie was going to be made? Were you an actor in other movies, or did you desire, how did you get this part, desire to do this? Why did you desire to do this part?
I was in New York, and I knew the director, but I had no idea what is he preparing to be for his first feature. And then, to make a long story short, he wanted to have an unfamiliar face. He didn't want to do it with an actor that it can be associated with other movies. And, you know, he wasn't sure if he's looking for the lead role, me for the lead role right away, but he wanted to give a chance to me, so to speak. And so I flew to Budapest, and we understood each other really well. You know, I fell in love with the script, and I said, you have no idea how much I thought this is gonna be just, I usually don't like this sort of movies, but I love this script so much. I would be very happy just to hold the lamp for free. I believe in this project, and then we started to do exercise and improvisations and stuff, and he got convinced. What can I say? I think I'm not an actor, but I think if I would have known anybody who I would have thought could do a better job, I would have tell him. I think I was I hope I was the right man at the right place.
Were your grandparents involved? Were your parents or the grandparents?
Yeah, my grandfather. Yeah. So that's a whole different. I could have been much more personal. I'm not sure if I have the time, a minute or two, to tell you that I was 12 years old when I found a shoebox of photos in my grandfather's home. I was living with him. I guess I was a bad kid and I was exiled or some sort of. And I never saw those photos. And even as a child, I knew right away that there are no photos anymore like that. These brownish, silverish photos with the edge was like zigzaggy. So I said, who are these people? And we were playing chess. And I said, Zadie, I found a bunch of photos there. He said, well, you don't supposed to. I said, okay, well, whatever. I don't supposed to, but I found them anyway. So who are those people? And he said, he put very, very, slowly. And I remember very surprised because my father was a chess champion, and he died when I was 4, and my grandfather wanted to catch up. And so we were playing chess games all night, every night. And we never unfinished the game. And all of a sudden, he takes the pieces off from the chessboard, and I'm like, I never saw him angry ever, and this was very unusual. Middle of the game to take the pieces, and I thought, he's gonna hit me. He's gonna, I don't know. He must be so mad. He's interrupts a game. Yeah. So I was very afraid what's gonna come. And then he put the shoebox down to the table, put the chess away, and says, this is my mother, this is my father, this is my pregnant sister, Nina, this is Asher, this is my younger brother, just as was as old as you were. He was 12 years old at the time, and they are all gone. I said, where are they? So this is how I met the story. And then it kind of fascinated me as a child. I wasn't a reader as a child. I was a little bad kid. I fought. I was always in the street, and and this made me to read because I was full of questions. And then he kind of bonded with me through this story. He wasn't just a old man who plays chess, but all of a sudden a whole world opened up, and there was this something, like, didn't call it Holocaust then, but it's just this whole thing, that the war and people and what, gas, what? And so he apologized to me when he was in the hospital and I was 16 and he was dying, and he said, I told you something I should have never told you. I told you too early, and I was like, no. Because I'm glad you told this, and I really am, because he died years after that, and I'd rather have the story from him than somehow learn it as history. So I was full of questions, and for like, I don't know, at least a year, he was answering me. And there was, for example, a fruit store, some sort of grocery, and he said, we don't shop from this guy. I said, why? And he said, because this guy was a capo, Jewish guy. He says, don't ever shop from him. If there is no banana or apple anywhere else, you never shop from him. And I went to school and I was listening to this guy. He looked so smiley, but he was a capo. So I had this child mythology, and on Thursday nights, his friends came to play cards. Friends from the ghetto, friends who came back from the camp. And they played cards. And I heard everything, all their stories. So my first poem book when I was in my late 20s was entirely dedicated to Auschwitz. So again, I was growing up with these stories. That's why I'm saying it's. I think the director might have also sensed that this is something that's in me, this Saul. That's why I don't call myself an actor, because I didn't have to turn myself out to become Saul. I think that Saul was in me. I'm not Saul, but he was in me.
May I ask you a second personal question? You invested part of your life, the team that produced the movie invested part of their lives in producing something that is supposed to have a certain purpose, that is supposed to have a certain effect. Do you believe that your effort, do you believe that this movie, do you believe that all the Holocaust centers that we have all over the world, do you believe the whole rhetoric of remembering the past has any impact on affecting a very deep-rooted anti-Semitism, anti-Jewishness that continues after so many years after the war?
The Holocaust centers and the Holocaust museums and the Holocaust studies departments, and I think they're very useful in North America and in Israel. I am feverishly against them in Europe. I don't want any Holocaust museum in Europe because since the Holocaust happened in Europe, I think each village and town should speak about the Jews of that town and village, and they should have a room or a house. So instead of, it's very smart to have Yad Vashem because there was no Holocaust in Israel. It's very smart to have Holocaust Museum in the USA because people go there and they learn about it. But I find it ridiculous and weak and coward almost to have a Holocaust museum in Budapest, Prague, Vienna, Paris, Berlin, because it happened all over, people. So don't come to Budapest and make a day trip about it and then it's a check mark and then you're done with it. You don't even have to come to Budapest. I tell you what, there were Jews where you're coming from. So why don't you find the graves and why don't you find out what happened? And why did you find out, and so locally, it should be done locally in Europe. In North America, yes, I think it's great, it's important, so is important the African American, the Native American. Everybody should have their story out. It's extremely important. Do I believe that anti-Semitism will ever evaporate, disappear? No, it will never disappear. Are things better now than, 60, 70 years ago? Yes, they are. Will they better 10 years from now? No, they won't. I'm not a dummy. I don't think that this can be ever passé. This can be ever, it's a phenomena. It's universal in the human psyche. It has religious roots. It's never gonna go away. But guess what? It's like a certain disease. You can't cure it, but you fight it. That's what it is.
I think we are running, unfortunately, out of time, and the last question undoubtedly has to be for Professor Ashvat.
Oh, I just wanted to ask you, I wanted to tell you that basically this representation of the Sonderkommando is really a fantastic and almost unheard of situation, because usually the Sonderkommando is looked upon even by great historians as this terrible thing that the poor Jews had to do this, but there is always this little question mark that says, why didn't they commit suicide, or why didn't they hid from it, or why did they do it? That is really almost in every, so to speak, serious historian's account, I would say until the 1980s or 1990s. And I think that one of the great achievements of this movie is that somehow it gives an insight that basically until now only our fantasy could produce, but now we see it in some concrete ways.
Thank you, Zsuzsa. I agree with you. My favorite thinker, if I may pick one on the Holocaust, is Primo Levi. And you can see in his writings up until his last book that in the 50s, when he started to publish first, he called them the ravens. He also had a very negative and judgy view on the Sonderkommando. And then by his last book, The Drawn and the Saved, he wrote a year before he died, basically he says what I believe is the right approach, is that you have to suspend judgment. You have to suspend judgment. You know, this is something that is extremely difficult to even think about it from an armchair. We have to suspend judgment. What these people have been through is beyond words, and we should be the last people to stigmatize them. And that reminds me an interesting thing, I'm going to finish with that, is that this fellow, my friend Dario Gabay, who lives in Los Angeles, 94 years old, who is the very last one alive from the Sonderkommando, who saw this with his own eyes, and he heard it with his own ears, the screamings from that door. And when he went for the Eichmann trial to Jerusalem in 1961, you arrived and you were in a hotel, and the trial went on, and you were waiting for your turn to be called to the courtroom, and it could be, tomorrow, could be next Wednesday. So he was there, and killing time, he went to a movie theater. And in the 60s in Israel, there was this custom, it's always in Hungary, I'm not sure in the US they did that ever, that before the movies, they had this little 10 minutes of like news, what's the word? Newsreels, right. So Israel had that too. And in that, he was sitting for some Western movie just to take his mind off the Eichmann trial. And in the newsreel, they said, the Eichmann trial started, here he is, and they showed Eichmann. And then they showed a fellow Sonderkommando member, doing his witness, telling what happened, just a sentence or two. And they, the narrator said, and this is, Yehuda Gluck from Poland, and he is describing what did he have to do as a Sonderkommando. And people, 1961 Jerusalem, people took their shoes off like this, and they threw it to the canvas. And they screamed in Hebrew, Bogdim, Bogdim, which means traitors, traitors, traitors. And here he was, in the country of the Jewish people, 2 decades after or less, and these youngsters, these people who were his folks, they were Jews, and they were throwing their shoes to the movie canvas, calling the Sonderkommando member traitors. So he lowered his head and he just wanted to get out because he felt so terrible. Again, so if our movie was not doing anything else, but to kind of was able to problematize the life and the situation of being a Sonderkommando, that I think is already an important thing we achieved. And now in Israel, nobody would do that. Because if we would have done this movie, Son of Saul, in the 60s or the 70s, we would have been lynched. I'm telling you. It only could have done by Hungarians, I'm sorry, and it only could have done by in 2015. And the only Oscars we could have ever got was the foreign category. Can you imagine if this is an American movie, it goes nowhere? So it was all a lot of things that it's a lucky turn of events. I'm very glad for the success of the movie because a lot of millions of people would have never see it if it doesn't get the Oscars and all that. So I'm not generally into that sort of crowd, but for this movie, I'm glad. Thanks for coming.
Me too. Me too. Thank you so much. Vaya. I would like to give you this gift from UTD. We cannot be grateful enough for your lecture and for your presence and for your film.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.